I'm Joe Rogan. Ask me anything. Be honest, Dana made you start wearing those suits, didn't he? Yes. They're kinda gross and make me feel like a fancy man, but the UFC likes when I wear them, and now I no longer have to pack my standard black button-down dress shirt in my luggage, so I agreed to it. I'm not a suit guy, but the tailor that makes those things is amazing. He expertly figured out how to get fancy clothes to look fairly reasonable on my troll-like body. I'm just not the kind of person to focus on fancy clothes normally. I'm not ruling out change though. Who the fuck knows? I might wake up one day and decide to wear suits for the rest of my life. I leave everything open. Joe, I'm a big fan of your podcasts. After the recent excellent 5-hour podcast from Ari Shafir, do you think that having any sort of podcast time limit should be transcended? And ultimately you will just provide a live 24-hour feed of everything you say, do, and think? I have a strange feeling that something similar is what the future holds for all of us. Every person will be a channel, and we'll be able to tune into each other's lives the way we tune into shows today. We'll eventually be able to actually experience all the sensations people are feeling as well. First just physically, then eventually the actual emotions and even the thought processes. I think about this shit all the time, and as the interconnectedness that we experience from technology continues to expand, I feel like it's just a matter of time before something like this is a reality. Or maybe I'm just really high. Or both. My son is 5 years old. Is that a good age to get him into martial arts, or should I wait a bit? I think as long as he's interested, it's a fine time if you find a really good instructor. Don't take him to the first place you find. Look around and do as much research as you can. Mixedmartialarts.com is an amazing resource for finding out about schools near you. I think for little kids, one consideration is to not push them and make sure they're having fun. He's just a little boy, and as long as he's enjoying it, he's going to grow. But I always worry with kids that age that if you push them into something, it can deter their enthusiasm for a long time. Another thing that can be of benefit to young kids is learning traditional martial arts. I wouldn't recommend many forms of traditional martial arts as a primary skill set for someone that's an adult that wants to fight soon, but for little kids, the discipline and philosophy you get from a really good traditional school can really come in handy in life. There's lots of lessons that people learn inherently from pushing themselves in hard training, but I think one of the things that many folks that only participate in MMA training miss is the tools that really solid traditional martial arts styles teach for managing the mind. There's also a benefit in taking traditional styles early, like Taekwondo, because you develop flexibility and kicking dexterity before your body matures. To this day, I'm really flexible, and I have to think that a lot of that can be attributed to starting Taekwondo and stretching right when I was going through puberty. What is your take on the recent Elon Musk comments claiming that the current progress in artificial intelligence development is summoning the demon? Elon Musk is a real visionary, and when he says shit like this, I certainly don't take it lightly. I think that the inevitability of artificial intelligence reaching some sort of unimaginable level of awareness is something that a lot of people avoid thinking about, even really intelligent people. It's almost like looking at death. It makes us uncomfortable, so we just avoid it. It could also be that we're just wrapped up in standard bullshit of everyday life so much that we're not giving the concept of artificial life and the potential problems that it can create the attention that it deserves. Almost like a test that we know we're going to have to study for, but beginning that studying is just too painful, so we continually put it off. If you sit alone and ponder it, charting out possible courses of progression from what they're working on now, and imagine what the possibilities could hold 50, 100, or 1,000 years from now, I could easily imagine a scenario where artificial intelligence becomes the dominant life form on this planet. Scary shit for us. When they finally perfect the robot fuck doll, what will you name yours? Hitler. I always wanted to fuck someone named Hitler. After I was done, I would change her name to something more beautiful. I would just call her Hitler for the first one to check that off the list. Hey Joe, I love your comedy. Do you ever get jealous of another comedian and say to yourself, damn, I wish I wrote that? I don't anymore, but I definitely did when I was young. I recognized that as a bit of a mental trap and considered it to be a weakness, so I flushed it out of my psyche. I think a lot of how we move around in this life is based on habit and not having a well thought out philosophy for dealing with common traps the mind and ego can set for you. I realized a long time ago that instead of being jealous, you can be inspired and appreciative. It carries more energy to you with none of the mental weight that comes from knowing that you're being a weak bitch. When you're jealous, especially of someone else's art or creations, you automatically put up these selfish walls that reinforce your stupid ideas. It's hard to put those walls down and look at what you're hiding. Look at your own weakness and realize that the jealousy came from knowing that you're intimidated by someone else's work, and that when you compare it to your own, you fall short. That can be an awesome motivating force that can improve your life if you choose to be inspired and not jealous. One, being jealous, has no benefit whatsoever. The other is an incredible resource for creating momentum and improvement. The choice seems like it would be easy, but for whatever fucked up reason, our primitive monkey brains gravitate towards jealousy first. Fortunately, with the proper attention and focus, we can rewire those shitty, useless thoughts and use the same events to inspire us to grow and improve. Don't hate, appreciate. Joe, how was your first day back at the store? It was awesome. That place has a special energy that I really missed in the 7 years of not performing there. The new crop of young comics that are working there are completely on another level too. Much better in pretty much every way than past generation graduating classes. They're more original, more inspired, more intelligent, etc. I'm really happy I decided to come back. That place has me really fired up. If your comedy and podcast career came to a sudden end, what would you feel was your biggest accomplishment? There's some things I'm happy about from my comedy career, and I'm really happy that I've been able to make people laugh and distract them from their day-to-day bullshit at a comedy show or because they enjoyed one of my CDs or TV specials. But I don't know how many people have actually had life-changing thoughts because of it. The podcast, on the other hand, has spawned so many intense conversations with so many brilliant people that have shared so many amazing thoughts that it's actually enhanced people's lives. I never saw that coming. I can't count how many people have come up to me and told me that certain conversations have permanently altered the way they look at their life for the better and have inspired them to improve their lives. To me, that's probably the biggest accomplishment. None of it was by design. All of it was pretty unexpected, and it's something I value and appreciate deeply. That fucking podcast has some sort of weird life of its own. Sometimes I feel like I have this weird responsibility to show up and feed it, and that's really all I do. I go in and turn everything on and feed this thing that has its own objectives. It's certainly shaped my life in a pretty profound way as well. Having the privilege of sitting down and having 3-hour-long uninterrupted conversations with hundreds of brilliant people is an awesome perspective enhancer. Of all the mind-blowing things you and Duncan discuss about life, what core value/main point do you believe most likely to be true? At the end of the day, when Duncan and I sit down and have these podcasts, it's just two comics trying to make sense of shit and bouncing ideas off each other and out to you folks. I try to emphasize things that I've found to be true in my own life, and things that have resonated with me, and Duncan does the same. But we're really just two stoned comedians shooting the shit. All of us, you folks included. Everyone that is really pondering the mysteries of life, we're all doing the same shit. We're thinking, pondering, dissecting, and hopefully extracting something out of these conversations that we can hold on to, like some sort of psychic shield protecting you from worthless thoughts. Duncan and I are doing it on a podcast, but I see it all over the net in the form of Facebook conversations, Twitter debates, and of course other people's podcasts. I think it's why we value honesty so much and are disgusted by deception. We're thinking. Some of it sounds like stoner bro horseshit, and rightly so. Some of it's hilarious, and some of it occasionally misses the mark and veers off into the vast wasteland of retarded ideas. I think what it does for us, and hopefully for you folks too, is entertain and stimulate. I know when Duncan and I have these marathon THC-fueled conversations, I've come away from many of them with a huge smile on my face, an awesome appreciation of how fucking cool and smart Duncan is, and a constantly renewed appreciation of how fun it is to talk to him in a podcast form that I know other people will appreciate as well. I loved when you had Neil Tyson on your show. Any chance you'll have him on again? Yeah, we almost did another one recently, but it was real last minute and the only time he had available, I was out of town. We'll make it happen again, hopefully. I think Neil is one of the most important cultural figures in regards to spreading the fascination of science that our civilization has ever known. It's an honor to call that guy a friend. Do you feel that your message is lost on your stand-up and people see it as just humor? Or do you think people understand the message that you try to send with it? I think one of the best things that's ever happened to my stand-up is the podcast, because now I no longer have any motivation to send a message in a joke form. I just want my shit to be funny. If I can make points and be funny at the same time, awesome. I'm all for it. But most importantly, it has to be interesting and funny to me. I can explore ideas until the end of time on the podcast and never need it to be funny. But for me, as a fan at least, the comedy that I truly enjoy is the comedy that makes me laugh the most. In the past, comics didn't have something like a podcast where they could go into great depth about a fuckload of different subjects. So to get their ideas across and express themselves, they had to do it in their act. That led to a lot of comics getting preachy on stage, something that most people think is pretty gross. The beautiful thing about podcasting is it's just talking. It can be funny or it can be terrifying. It can be sweet, it can be obnoxious. It almost has no definitive form. In that sense, it's one of the best ways to explore an idea. and certainly much less limiting than trying to express that same idea in stand-up comedy. For some ideas, stand-up is best, but it's really, really nice to have podcasts as well. Joe, you're an awesome poet beast. Couple questions. 1. How do you stay so inspired/committed/driven? 2. My son was born 2 weeks ago. What are the main lessons you have about parenting? In your mind, what are the most important things to teach my son? I'm just really fucking lucky that I found a bunch of things that are really interesting to me. Creating comedy, podcasting, MMA, all those things are really compelling and exciting for me, so enthusiasm comes naturally. Inspiration is everywhere, especially when you're looking for it specifically. There's just so many cool people out there doing so much cool shit that you almost have to go out of your way to not be inspired. As for your son, congratulations. There's so much advice you could get and so many things you're probably going to figure out about yourself while you're raising him that I really don't know where to start. One thing that has helped me is to try to think as objectively as possible when you're teaching them things or correcting them. One thing I always do when I correct my kids is to let them know I did the exact same things they did. We all make mistakes, and that's how you learn and grow. I try to be as vulnerable in that regard as I can. I also tell them that I love them as much as life itself, and that my goal in explaining something or correcting them is just to make them grow and develop into the happiest, best person they can be. Even though I'm not sure how much of that gets in at 3 or 4, I think if you keep explaining things that way, eventually it becomes a standard idea in their little minds. I hope that helps. Best of luck to you and your family.
Hey Joe, huge fan here. I started working at Cap City Comedy Club in Austin after hearing how much you love the club on your podcast, which leads me to my question. What is your favorite club in America to perform at? And given the choice, who's your favorite comic to bring on the road with you, and why? I don't really have one favorite club. Cap City is certainly amongst my list of favorites, though. As for one comic, it would be Joey Diaz. No one consistently makes me laugh the way he does. And he makes everything else around him funny. We always say that Joey brings the party. That's really the best way to describe him. I love that dude. Have you ever had a guest come on the podcast that you regretted, or thought perhaps you should have done more research on before inviting? Not really, because even the ones that were off or weird, I just sort of turned a red band and we start talking around. The whole thing has been a real learning process, and I don't think it would be possible without the Sucky podcast being in the mix. When speaking with Neil deGrasse Tyson, you told him you realized thinking the moon landing could have been faked was kind of silly, and got him on your side, and then started bringing up all these YouTube clips for him to watch that shows it might have been faked. Did you really change your opinion on the moon landing? Or was it your way to set him up for some honest opinions on what might be considered even crazy? Edit. Reading the replies, a lot of people seem to be talking crap because he is open to the idea that parts of the moon landing could have been faked. That was not the intention of this question. I love that he is always willing to consider the extreme position with a completely open mind. That's why I listen to his show. Not many celebrities or Redditors for that matter would do that in public without registering a throwaway account. Huge props to Joe, and keep up the great work. I love conspiracy theories, always have. I'm not sure if the origins of that, from some deep-seated distrust of authority, or just what little information I have that's provable of known stuff that leaves me to ponder how much we don't know. That said, I always try to have an open mind when it comes to almost everything. I try to group my possibilities into camps of likely and unlikely based on the thinking of the brightest minds and their take on the subject. When I do that with the moon landing, clearly the brightest minds and the most trustworthy sources believe that the landings actually happened. That said, I not so secretly hold out some hope that stunning pieces of evidence would emerge that throws the entire subject into chaos. Why? Because I'm a silly person and I get a rush out of dumb stuff like that. That's why I watch Bigfoot shows, and that's why if I'm anywhere near a graveyard at night and there's no one around, I'll get out of my car and look for ghosts for a few minutes if I have the time. Like I said, I'm a self-professed silly person. If you ask me for an honest opinion, I would say that when you look at the evidence, it's certainly most likely that we went to the moon. That said, that's not nearly the dumbest thing I've held out hope for. For a long time, I was fascinated by these things called Roswell rods. There was this video about them detailing this fascinating new life form that could only be caught on video because they moved too fast for the human eye. I watched a few shows on this subject and spent hours discussing it, and even contemplated getting a video camera to see if I could find them in my neighborhood. Well, it turns out that these stupid things were just bugs filmed with cameras that couldn't quite keep up with the movement of the bugs, so it would create this weird video artifact that made them look like tubular flying squids. They cracked the mystery on the show Monster Quest. That might have been the actually only positive thing that came out of the Monster Quest show. Other than that, every episode was them pretending they might have found a monster, only to disappoint the crap out of you in the end. Really, it was a hilarious premise, because there was absolutely no suspense in these shows in these day and age. Because if they'd actually found some real monster, we would have heard about it online way before the episode ever aired. What is your favorite book that you've read? Fiction. Probably either Stephen King's Pet Sematary or Christine. And non-fiction, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. The reason those two Stephen King books are my favorite is it has to do with a time in my life in which I was reading them as it does the content. I've always been a huge fan of Stephen King. I just really enjoy that kind of book where there's no obligation to be realistic, and his imagination can take you on the craziest of rides, where a car can possess the soul of a dead man, or the next door neighbor could become a werewolf. Also, when I was reading those books for the first time, it was when I was riding the train into Boston to take Taekwondo classes, and I was a wild adventure in my life. It was the first time in my life where I felt like I was accomplishing anything. It was a 30-minute ride into town every day, and I looked forward to Stephen King books to keep me company. The War of Art is an amazing non-fiction book that's been really inspirational to me, and many of my friends. I believe I found out about it from a John Mayer tweet, and I began reading it, and once I began reading it, I was hooked. I actually bought many copies and handed them out to friends. Many people that I gave it to said the book changed the way they approach their craft, be it music, writing, or comedy, even people involved in non-creative businesses. It's a powerful book about the creative process.